Hi guys, Ed Barton, the Social Anxiety Coach again here. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why I gave up a six-figure income, a marriage, a house, a car, and everything to become a monk in Japan. Since I got out of the monastery in March 2023, many of you have been asking me to hear about the full story of what actually happened to me, how I got into Buddhism, and how I wound up becoming an ordained Zen monk in Japan. So in this video, I'm going to tell you all of that. I won't hold anything back, so stick around to the end. Also, if you're enjoying my content and you're getting value from the channel, please subscribe to this channel. Please like this video if it's helping you so that we can help get the word out about social anxiety and raise awareness and hopefully reach more people through this YouTube channel. So the story of me becoming a monk in Japan really goes back to Hull in my university days. Or if you're a real hardcore Buddhist or Hindu, you might say that it goes back way further than that into past lives and past karma. But I don't really see Buddhism in that way. I see it in very rational scientific terms. So I was first exposed to Buddhism when I was doing my undergrad degree in Hull. I had gone to see a psychotherapist or a counselor for free at the university. And he was recommended to me by a friend who had been studying Buddhism at the Bethnal Green Buddhist Centre in London from the age of 16. So he was a Buddhist and he recommended I go to counselling because he knew I had a lot of problems and a difficult family background. So I went up there and this guy also introduced me to Buddhism. So seeing this counsellor, Chris, I had a very amazing experience with him over the 6 weeks that I was working with him at the age of about 21. This is back in 2003 or something like that. And he recommended to me some books by Thich Nhat Hanh and Jack Kornfield. The book I'll put up on the screen was A Path with Heart by Jack Kornfield. And also he recommended anything by Thich Nhat Hanh. Anyway, I came across these books and they really had a massive impact on me, and from there I just dove really deeply into Buddhism. At the same time, I was spending a lot of time around this friend who had also got a background in Buddhism. Like I say, he'd been meditating from the age of 16 at the Bethnal Green Buddhist Centre in London, and there was a kind of confluence of factors that was going on at this time. I was going through psychotherapy or counselling for the first time ever in my life. I had a friend who was a Buddhist, and at the same time, psychedelic mushrooms were also basically legal in the UK. So me, this friend who was also interested in Buddhism and who had also been through the counselling process, we got together, we were doing mushrooms quite regularly, and I'd kind of dropped out of university at this time because I had had my first proper girlfriend and she had broken up with me, and I was too scared to go back on campus at that point because I believed that everybody had heard all the faults about me, all the problems that I had. So in my mind, there was no way I could go back on campus because everybody knew about this breakup I'd had with this girl. And so I was basically dropped out and was just doing mushrooms and giving myself an education at home, reading lots of books on Buddhism and the hippies and the Beat Generation and Zen Buddhism and stuff like that. So the result of taking mushrooms on a weekly or twice weekly basis, reading a lot of Zen Buddhism, going to counselling, and also attending my first meditation classes in Hull, the overall effect of this was that my mind basically started to expand really, really quickly. And I started to see life in a completely new way and question so many things that I'd never even questioned before. A lot of human society just started to look completely absurd, and you know, I was questioning why we live in these little boxes, drive around in these little boxes and live really strangely misguided lives. And amongst many of the books that I was reading were accounts written by Westerners who had become monks abroad. Some had become monks in Japan, some had become monks in Thailand. But this really captured my imagination, and reading these accounts, I immediately felt this is something that I absolutely wanted to do at some stage in my life. Unfortunately, I was still quite wild in those days, and I had a lot of energy and stuff I needed to get out of my system. So from first discovering Buddhism and this kind of monastic life that I'd read about at the age of 21, it was another 17 years before I actually entered the monastery in Japan. And in the meantime, I traveled around Asia a lot, I drank a lot, I did a lot of drugs, and had a lot of sex in the end, but that was, to begin with, that was mainly fueled by drugs and alcohol. And then when I got my confidence and got rid of social anxiety, I was able to do that naturally. But I had a lot of going around the houses basically that I had to do before I came back finally to this resolution I'd made when I was 21 that I will get ordained as a Zen monk in Japan. And that was a very firm you could call it a karmic seed that had been planted in my head. So what happened is, as you will know from my other videos if you've seen them, if not you can check them out, I left my job at the embassy in 2015 and then I started online with a bunch of friends who got me into digital marketing. I set up my own company. Very quickly I made multiple six figures in my first couple of years that I was trading and doing stuff online. So I spent that money traveling, I invested in property, I did various things. And then I got to the point, I was traveling around Sri Lanka with my girlfriend and I was still finding that I was getting very wound up by all the drivers and stupid things that I thought, why is this still winding me up? I've got a six-figure income. I'm engaged to this really beautiful girl. I've got a coaching practice. I've traveled to basically all the countries that I want to. I get to surf every day. I've ticked off all these things on my bucket list, but I'm still not satisfied. I'm still very impetuous, very short-tempered. I get irritated by very small, silly things. And as I was mulling this over on our trip around Sri Lanka, on one day we were driving to the town of Kandy, and I entered Kandy and we started to drive around the lake in the center of town. And while I was thinking this over, I just suddenly saw a building that had the word Buddhist written above it. And I didn't even have time to register what it was. I just swerved the hire car over, parked outside, and it said Buddhist Publication Society. And I was like, this is what I need. And I just went in, and inside I discovered a load of these amazing old meditation manuals and stuff, especially ones by a Thai teacher called Ajahn Chah. And this is really important because up until that point, I had really lost faith in Buddhist teachers. I'd seen a lot and read a lot of books, and I'd come to the conclusion that none of them had got enlightened. Enlightenment may actually just be a complete myth, which was only attained by the Buddha and a couple of other people, and it's basically impossible. And a lot of these guys are just skinny, sappy, wet kind of guys who are hiding out in monasteries, and this is BS. But picking up Ajahn Chah that day and then reading through his manuals and stuff later, his books, I had total faith that he had a series of deep experiences and was a very realized teacher. And this completely fired up my internal faith again in Buddhism and the Enlightenment endeavor. So the more I read, the deeper I got immersed, especially with Ajahn Chah. I found his teachings really accessible and they had an immediate impact on my life. So at this point I was living in a luxury apartment in a very nice area of Manila with my girlfriend. We were engaged to get married. I was still making about £100,000 at that time online, so things were still good. And the conviction became stronger and stronger that I had to leave this life and go into the monastic life. And part of that was because Ajahn Chah talked about this concept of monastic training. And I've always been someone that's enjoyed training, whether it's like physical training, martial arts training, rugby training, whatever it is, I was always into it, training my mind, training my body. And this just really captured my imagination again, monastic training. I was like, that sounds awesome and I really want to do it. So at this point, I started to leave the Philippines for periods of time and go around Asia and look for different teachers. And I started off in Japan. I went to 2 monasteries there. The second monastery I visited in Japan was where I found the teacher who would finally become the teacher who ordained me in Japan. But after Japan, I went to Myanmar. I spent 5 weeks in a monastery there, then 2 weeks in another monastery there. Then on to Thailand, a couple of weeks in Wat Pa Nanachat there, the famous international monastery. Then I went down south to Rayon to stay with a very good teacher called Ajahn Anan in Wat Marp Jan, which is further south near Bangkok. And then from there, I went back to the UK because I was very interested in the Ajahn Chah lineage. So I stayed with more teachers in the UK from that lineage. I went up to Scotland as well, stayed in a monastery in the Tibetan tradition. So went through Asia and the UK looking for teachers, and at this point I was still undecided. I went back to the Philippines to go back to my life there and consider what to do. And it was at that point then that I realized that out of all the teachers I had been to, it was the teacher in Japan who I felt was absolutely the real deal. He seemed to be the most realized teacher, and the monastery there was extremely strict. It was very scary, to be honest, when I first went there, to see the lifestyle and the intensity of the people training there. And it really freaked me out, actually, to see people who'd given up mainstream life to go and live in those kind of conditions and in that way. And to be honest, the effect that it had on me, the way that it kind of scared me and shocked me, made me feel like that's something I've really got to go towards. So anyway, I explained my situation to my girlfriend. We came to some accommodation, and at that point it was getting towards November, And then I entered the monastery in November 2019, and I stayed there until March 2023. I had to leave because there are a lot of family issues going on in the UK. My mum had developed cancer, and she had a drinking problem that was getting out of control, and I needed to go and help my dad to go and look after her and to look after him because he was having complete carer's burnout. Because I'd been in Japan the whole time during COVID. We went in, the monastery got locked down, Japan got locked down. Once you enter that monastery anyway, my teacher's very strict. You don't go in or out anyway. You have a day off once a month. You can go and do stuff, wash your clothes, or do stuff that you might need to do, go and have a sauna to relax your muscles or whatever, but you don't go home or go traveling or anything like that. So I spent from November 2019 to March 2023 just in the monastery that whole time. And then it's a whole other story of what happened when I left. It's a whole other story of also what happened in the monastery. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of history of like how it all happened, how I got there. And it's really important at this point to say why I did it. And it was because I felt that I'd basically evolved and ascended up through all of the layers of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And I'd now reached this point where I wanted Satori or Kensho, which I had read about in books from the age of 20, 21 at the university library. And this was the experience where subject and object disappear. You merge into one with the whole universe. And this just sounded so incredible to me that I was like, that's worth more than any money or anything in the world. I want to have that experience and be able to bring that experience to other people. During my time in a monastery, it's taboo to talk about spiritual experiences really, but I don't see Buddhism as a spiritual thing. I see it very much about neuroscience. I didn't have the experience that you do read about where there's this merging. And you can even read about that in books like Flow, where they talk about people who are so involved in their craft or their sport, such as, like climbing a sheer rock face without any ropes, that time stands still and you merge with your activity. I didn't experience that. I experienced some things which I will talk about on the channel because I don't think it's sacrosanct or taboo to talk about them. And they are things such as when you just stop thinking so much, you start to see how the whole world that you were living in before was just your thoughts. And then for the first time you drop into reality where there is no past and no future, and it is just now. And this is a very amazing experience and something which I'm happy to talk about in more detail on other videos. But in this video, I just want to tell you that's basically the potted history. I went through all these stages of overcoming social anxiety, wanting to make money, wanting to be a playboy, doing that, having as much sex as I wanted, learning to ride a motorbike, learning to surf, entering the British Jiu-Jitsu championships, national championships, doing all these things that I wanted to do to live the kind of like Joe Rogan successful, and I'm not comparing myself to Joe Rogan obviously, but that kind of successful life within the paradigm of how we're supposed to live in normal society. But then I realized there was still more that I wanted to go to and experience and transcend through just this everyday life of working out and surfing and having success online and all this kind of stuff. So I am still very much committed to that project. Like I say, I left the monastery because of family issues, and through my coaching I hope I can help other people ascend through their hierarchy of human needs as well. And a return to monastic life definitely isn't out of the question for me later on, but I'm also very interested in how we can bring the best of modern society, which I don't think there is a whole lot that is going so well in modern society right now. But there are things that I do believe you need to be happy and mentally healthy, like weight training, cardio training, flexibility. And I struggled with problems in the monastery because I developed muscle issues and posture problems, which I had to remedy with weight training and yoga and stuff. So in my mind, we can bring the best of neuroscience, modern science, and monastic practice and spiritual religious practice, take it out of the monasteries and create places where there are swimming pools, there are gyms, there are places where you can do cardio and stretch, and also intense introspection, many hours of meditation per day, and experience these much elevated, purer states of consciousness and mind. So that's really my vision for the future, how we can synergize and interlink and marry these two things, the best of monastic training and the best of modern science and modern society. So that's all I got for you today. Just wanted to like bring you up to speed a little bit on how everything happened in Japan. If you're interested in this, please hit me up in the comments below and let me know what you want to know more about. Be very happy to talk more about my experiences over the last few years. And once again, I'd really appreciate it if you can subscribe to the channel, like the video. It helps me to reach more people and hopefully to help more people overcome their social anxiety. Okay, thank you very much for now, and I'll speak to you all soon.